Okay, here it is, the client project page. We'll make one, but what we're really doing here is setting up a design that'll make 8 more pages automatically. Is it magic? No. Is it science? We asked Dr. Gloria Lee Sutherland at Stanford University to...
Did we really?
No.
Then
We
why
didn't.
did you...
Okay, she wasn't
She's
available.
not even real.
Fictional.
I can't.
We'll cover this in 6 parts. We'll create the world's simplest hero section. We'll create a grid. We'll work on the left column, then the other 2 columns. Then, if we have time, spoiler alert, we will, we're going to talk about adding additional images for each client project. Let's start with the simple hero section. And to access this page, we're going to go from page at the top, we're on portfolio right now, we're going to go down to the CMS collection pages. And when we created this collection long ago, client projects template was automatically created. And it's blank, and it should be. We haven't created anything yet. But something to note before we do, if we go to item up here, we can see we have each page, we have each of our collection items different. You can see, you click any of them, they're all blank because again, we haven't added anything. So let's add a section. We'll drag in a section and we'll call it client project hero. And we can set a height like 50 VH, 50% of the viewport height. And here's where we can link this content. Here's where we can take the content from our CMS collection and link it to each of these pages. We'll go to element settings. We'll get the background image from the featured image. Now, as we've done before, we can go back to the style panel. We can modify this and affect this by creating or by adding a background image, example bg.png. That's what shows by default. But we can control our background this way. We're just centering it, setting it to cover, and that's it. Can go and switch items. New home in Palo Alto looks like that. Richmond home build looks like that. It's loading the image from each collection item. How do we quickly switch? Let's hold Shift Option on Mac or Shift Alt on PC and just hit left and right. We're modifying, we're switching between each of these collection pages. That's the hero section. What about the grid? Well, we can grab a grid from the add panel and drag it underneath the hero section. Let's do 3 columns for this design, and let's make this first column a little bit wider. Let's do 2 FR. So that takes up half, and each of these take up a quarter of the available width. Let's hit done, and we'll grab a div block so we can organize our information in the leftmost column. Let's span that div block across both rows, and we can put some content inside. Let's start with the heading. Put our heading inside the div block, and the heading is essentially going to be the name of the project. This was Industrial Loft Reno. We could switch to Richmond Home Build. And every time we switch collection items, this information, the picture, the heading, all the content we're going to put inside, it updates. It switches between each collection page. So back here, this is home renovation in Berkeley. That's okay for now. Let's add a rich text field. So in this, we can add, let's actually put that in the correct order. We can add to this rich text anything that we pull right from our collection. So project summary, that might go on top, that's good. We can add another rich text block. We have 2 here. We have the project summary and then we have the project details. We'll put that one right underneath the first one. We'll pull project details. That looks pretty good. This is our heading and this is our content that shows up underneath of these. Holding down Shift and Option or Shift Alt on PC, left and right, we're going to switch between each of these projects. Okay, let's work on styling. For our heading, we can switch to a different font. We can switch to Playfair, select the correct font weight. In fact, let's delete that class for a moment, and let's use our original heading. Major heading, and we can add a new combo class, darker, and change the color to black or gray. Here's how black looks. That looks pretty good. And the other thing is, on our grid, if we go back to our portfolio, we had this consistent look of 60 pixels over here, 60 pixels of padding on all sides. We can do the same thing on our grid in our client projects template. So let's select that grid and do 60 pixels of padding, holding down Shift and dragging to affect all sides at once. That looks pretty good. Next, we want some more information to the right. In fact, we have all of our content strategy notes here, and we know for each of these client project pages, we want the testimonial, we want the location, the type of project, we want the date it was completed. We want to put all that information on this page. So how do we get it on this page? Well, we're going to use grid for that. We can go and edit so we can add as many rows as we want. Let's add 5 rows. We can change this later. We'll hit done. And let's start putting in information. So let's grab some text, put a text block right here, and this text block can say location. And we can copy and paste this text block. It'll just paste into the next available cell. And we can pull that location. We can get that location information from the collection. So that works fine. Let's copy and paste again. This time we're going to remove that binding, and we'll call this one type. Copy and paste again. You can get this information from the type of project. You can even say type of project here. And copy and paste again. Now, we can see the text block shows up underneath this content. That's because it's taking up the next available cell, but we want this div block to span the full height. So let's do that. So this one, let's grab it and call it date completed. Copy and paste this one. Pull this text from date completed. That looks good. And we could put the design team here. We could list each design team member, but this works for now. This is a pretty clean, simple type of design. Let's remove those extra rows that we're not using, 1 and 2, but we will have to adjust this div block. Let's pull that div block back up so it's only taking up the rows we need. That looks pretty good. Now, something that's happening by default in Grid, each of these is taking up about equal space. If we edit our grid, we can see each of these is set to auto. We can change that behavior by switching the bottom one to 1 FR, 1 fraction unit, hitting enter. That will collapse the rest, so it will only take up the space that's necessary for each of these text blocks. And all that extra space that's defined by this div block, everything inside this div block, all that extra space is distributed to the bottom row. But what if we want to make a change? What if the location and all this information here might look better underneath the heading? Well, we can grab that heading and remove it from the div block, put it right in the grid, and then span that heading across all 3 columns. That will push everything else down. Now, remember, before when we set this to 2 FR, we set this to 1 FR, we were only estimating. It might make more sense to collapse this, to make this something more like 3.5 FR, so that all this information is a little bit closer together. And we could set a limit on this div block. So let's create a class. We'll call this client project content, and let's set a limit. Let's set a width of 60%. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little higher, 70%. Okay, this is looking a lot better. Now, when we made that change, something else happened with the distribution, that vertical distribution here. We had set this 3rd row to 1 FR. Let's switch that back to auto, and we'll switch the bottom one, this new row. Let's switch it to 1 FR. Let's add another row, grab the side, 1 FR. That's what we're looking for. So we have that clean, consistent look. That's our grid, the primary structure of our grid. Let's move on to the left column, and we'll do our specifics here. The other thing we're missing, and we can add this by grabbing a paragraph, we're missing, let's put this right in that client project content block. Let's actually put it at the bottom. The other thing we're missing is the quote, that testimonial. We used it on the home page, but we could also use it here. So let's get our text, let's move this up here, get our text from the testimonial. Okay. And for the styling, we might want something a little different here. We could say testimonial, not preview. Let's use testimonial highlight. And we can do a few things here. Let's see if we have a thicker weight, italics, and maybe some more space, some margin on the top. That looks pretty good. Okay. Our left column is made up of the major heading, which is actually spanning all 3 columns. We have the rich text blocks for our content. Those are in client project content. And this is our testimonial highlight. Again, what we've done here is set client project content to 70% width. If we change that number, that left column, the content in that left column changes in terms of width. That looks pretty good for now. Let's move on to that second column. And what we'll want to do in this column, we have 3 different text blocks here. We have 3 different text blocks in the right column. Let's create a style. So we can call this class content label. And we can do some specific styling here. For instance, it might make sense for these to be all caps. So we can choose all caps. And we can apply this content label. We can apply this class to each of these. So we can make changes to all of them at once. And let's decrease the size slightly. Let's increase the letter spacing. And let's choose a little bit of a lighter color. That looks pretty good. Berkeley, Whole Home Reno, these look okay as is. We might want to leave those. Now, because we're using FRs, we're using fraction units for each of the columns, we're losing the ability to automatically adjust column size based on the content inside each of these. So we could edit our grid, and one FR here. Instead, we can just do auto. And same with this one. Let's set this one to auto. And now we're only using the content, we're only using the space inside each of these. This might be a preferred method. We could, if we wanted, instead just put this one back to 1FR. It's going to keep the content spaced a little more evenly. The goal is to make sure these labels, these content labels, and each of the pieces of content, so location and Berkeley and type of project and whole home reno, that these actually link up. One thing to note, the spacing on these is a little off, and that's okay, but it's something to note. The Berkeley and location don't have the same kind of baseline, so we might want to add some padding to the top to make an adjustment. We can eyeball that. That looks pretty good. That's the middle column. What about the rightmost column? Well, we could leave this exactly as is. Any adjustments beyond 1FR, it's just going to affect the width of this relative to other parts of our design. Let's try 0.75 FR, and let's switch Shift, Option, and left or right arrow. Again, on PC, this would be Shift, Alt, left or right arrow. And these seem to work fine. If we had a long project name, it would just knock the content down. In fact, let's try that out. Cupertino Home Build. Let's go to the CMS, Client Projects, Cupertino Home Build. Let's create a type of project that is new build for Cupertino Home Build project things. Nonsense, of course. Let's save this and see what it looks like on the page. It's just knocking the rest of the content down to the next line. It actually looks fine with a long label. Let's go back to the CMS and change that before we forget that we changed it. Switch to new build, save that. And as we'd expect, the content adjusts. It automatically updates. We don't have to manually update this every time we make a change in the CMS. But for our right column, let's make a change to the text block. Let's call this Client Project Detail. And we might want to add some padding, give us a little more space with these. We might want to change the color. Could be black here for a little bit more detail. Just applying this class to each of them. That looks pretty good. Okay, but that's the rightmost column. What about additional project images, additional client images? Rebecca sent us a ton of content, including other images for each of these projects. What if we want to use those on these client detail pages? Well, we can. We'll go over to our CMS because this requires adding a new field. Let's go to our settings. And right now we have a featured image section. Let's add a new field. This is going to be a multi-image field because we want to be able to upload multiple images to one field. And we'll call this additional project images. We'll save, and let's drag it so it's right underneath the other featured image. So we have the featured image over here, and under that we have the additional project images. Let's save our collection. Now, if we just move forward from here, nothing will happen for two reasons. One, we didn't add any additional images to any of these client projects. But two, we haven't built it into our client detail page. We're going to do both of those right now. First, let's add some of the content. So if we go to our Cupertino Home Build, and we have this additional project images right here, we can select just off screen from what's being captured, just selecting a bunch of Cupertino images from this build, and we're just going to let go, and instantly they get uploaded to our new field. We just had 7 images added to our field. Let's save, and so we can design with this. Let's go to the Cupertino view. Let's switch over to Cupertino Home Build, and we can add a collection list. A collection list, as we've used before, will let us pull information for each of our images. So let's drag in a collection list. The source is going to be additional project images. And that's it. We can see we have one entry for each client image. In a collection list like this, we'll see a new row, a new entry for each image. Now, let's use a div block. We're going to use a div block when we place here. And the reason we're using a div block inside each collection item is so we can have control over how our image is displayed. So this div block is going to be additional client image. We'll set its height to maybe 400 pixels. That looks pretty good. And we'll see these additional client images, they're showing up in each of our collection items. So with additional client image selected, let's grab that background. Let's grab that background image from the additional project images. And that's it. We're seeing all of the project images right here. Let's configure them. Still have the additional client image class selected. Let's add a background. Let's set it to cover and center. That's looking pretty good. We might want to do more than just 400 pixels here. We could do something like 700 pixels. So someone can scroll down and see each of these entries. Another thing we might want on the collection item itself, in between each collection item, we could add some margin, 30 pixels on the bottom. So each of these is spaced out. Or if we want the margin, to match what we see on the sides, we could just do 15 pixels. That works as well. 15 pixel space in between all of these. Now, that's Cupertino. What about everything else? Well, let's go back to our CMS and Industrial Loft Reno. This works fine. This is our Emeryville project. We're going to reach off screen, grab some images from the Emeryville project and drag those in. Those upload just the same. So once we upload images for each of these client projects, they'll show up automatically on each page. So for Emeryville, let's hit save. We'll close out of this and let's switch from Cupertino to that Industrial Loft Reno in Emeryville. Same thing here. If we scroll down, we can see these images showed up. Now, there are only 4. There are only 4 images for our project in Emeryville, for our Industrial Loft Reno, and that's okay because there were only 4 images we uploaded. It will show a collection item. An additional collection item will show up for every picture that you add. You won't see blank spaces if you've only added 2 pictures. You won't see anything cut off if you've added 22 pictures. So that's Industrial Loft Reno, that's Cupertino. We'll upload the other images off camera so you don't have to sit through each of these drag and drop sequences, but it'll go pretty quickly. But that's it. In the time it took us to create 1 page of content, we didn't really have to type much, and 8 other pages were created automatically. This means Rebecca and her team can add or modify client projects at any time, and pages will be automatically created. They'll show up on the Hayes Valley portfolio page, and when you click them, let's actually show that off real quick. If we go back to portfolio and go to preview mode, let's choose Cupertino Home Build. If we click that, it'll take you right to that client detail page with all those beautiful images shown in line. That specific page for the project they worked on. Up next, we'll make these pages responsive. Same deal with that. We'll only design once, and the other pages will follow suit.